Hi guys, welcome to the software testing help. Today we're going to talk about the topic that how the TestNG can make our test easier. So how TestNG makes test easier. So we will be explaining the most used annotations in the TestNG. As we know that TestNG is a framework that was designed to help us doing the testing in Selenium better. So there are some annotations that TestNG is providing, and by making the use of those annotations we can make and manage our test cases better. So we will be taking the very much practical examples by the helping of the programs. You will be able to see that how these annotations work and how can they help us in maintaining the test cases in TestNG. So first of all we will see that what are the basic annotations available in TestNG. So this is the sample program that we are going to use. So I'm simply creating a new class. I've created a Java project. In this Java project I have the reference libraries of all the Selenium jar files, as well as I have the TestNG integrated. So whenever I will run the test cases designed in the Selenium as well as TestNG, they will pick up the definitions of all the TestNG annotations from here. So I'm creating a class. For that I have simply right click on this project, go to new, then go to class. I'm taking my class name as my class. So I'm simply taking the example of this program. So if we look into this program consists of some of the basic annotations of the TestNG. Like you can see that there is before test, there is at the rate test, there is at the rate after test. So these are the very basic annotations available in TestNG, which tells that this is our test case. At the rate test simply means that this annotation simply suggests that whatever the function we have written in at the rate test is our test case, and at the rate before test is you consider as a kind of prerequisite. Like when we do the manual testing we have some prerequisite. So similarly in automation testing, at the rate before test is a kind of prerequisite that will be executed before any test function is called. It means before the at the rate test is called, this will be called. And at the rate after test simply means that whenever this test case or this annotation gets executed, it has completed execution, then only at the rate after test will be called. So as an example, if we go through this program, in this we have initiated the driver is equal to new Firefox driver in at the rate before test. In the test function we are simply calling google.com and we are checking whether the Google page has been loaded. After that we are quitting our driver, that is our Firefox instance of the WebDriver will get closed. So let's try to quickly execute this program and see how the result looks like. So to run this program, simply going to the run and I'm pressing the first, that is Control F11. Now you can see that the TestNG has started running the test case. It is giving us the impression that the TestNG has just invoked as soon as we have started running this program using Control F11. Now let's see that how these annotations work in TestNG. Now the Firefox instance has been called. Now it has opened up the Google search page. Now it has closed the WebDriver instance. So if we look into this execution, the reports is getting generated and logs are getting generated that the TestNG started running the test case. First of all, it has initiated the driver is equal to new Firefox driver. That was the reason our Firefox browser was instantiated and the Firefox browser was opened. Now after that, it has moved to the test function. You can see into the print that it is printing loading Google search page. After that, it opened the google.com. After opening the google.com, it is printing Google search page loaded fine. Now after the test case has been executed here, it has moved to this at the rate after test. So you can see that driver.quit means the driver is getting quit. That is the reason our Firefox browser was closed, and afterwards there was no failure found in the test case. So it is giving us the passed test, means the test function that we have called is getting passed, so there is no failure. So this is the hierarchy, or you can say the structure in which the annotations work: at the rate before test, at the rate test, and at the rate after test. So if we look onto this slide, we have the explanation for this. So generally we have split the single main function into three functions, that is start, test, close. So when we talk about in core Java, we used to write the main function, and all the programming logic that we have written into the main function will become our test case. But in TestNG, we have some starting point, we have the closing point, we have the testing point. So start is simply initialize the WebDriver that we have seen into the before test, that we are initializing our WebDriver. Test is perform our exact requirement, that is the test case you want to perform. And close is simply close the browser once the testing is done. So if we talk into the terms of annotations, so these split are simply called as at the rate before test, at the rate test, and at the rate after test. So at the rate before test says that keep this annotation before a method which has to be called initially when you run the script. In our script we put it before start method because we want to initialize the WebDriver first. Means we simply want that before our test case gets called, we want that our WebDriver should be initialized. And keep this annotation before a method which will do the exact operation of your script. Means the requirement or the testing you want to perform, just write the logic and at the rate test, and in at the rate after test keep this annotation before method which has to run at the end. In our script, closing browser has to be done at the end, so we put this annotation before close method. So this is the structure, or you can say the basic annotations of the TestNG: at the rate before test, at the rate test, and at the rate after test. So talking about some more annotation, that is TestNG test case priority. Now just imagine a case that you have 10 test cases to handle in your application. Now there is a priority that you want to set. Whenever we are running out the test cases, we have the priority that this test case should be run before we run the next test case, or there is a kind of priority that you have set according to your testing. So we can handle such kind of priorities in TestNG using the annotation at the rate test and passing the parameter priority. So we will quickly see into this example and see that how priority works into the TestNG. Now if we look into this program, we have three test cases, that is this one, and this one. So if you look into the functions, the first function says that public void register account, second is public void send email, third is public void login. Means Whenever we want to work in any of the website, take any of the example of any of the website, generally we register to that website, afterwards we log into that website, then afterwards when we have successfully logged in, we send an email. Like you have a Gmail where you have to register, then you have to log in, then you have the send email functionality accessible to you once you have logged in. Similarly, we have taken the reference of such example and we want our test case should be executed in a particular order, in a particular priority, because we cannot execute that first of all we are executing send mail, then we are executing login, then we are executing registration account, because this is not the proper order. So when you want to prioritize your test cases, when you want them to execute in a particular order, we set this parameter as priority. So simply you have to write @test and then after that you have to set the priority. So it's simply like that, you write @test in braces, you simply press control space, automatically the suggestion will be typed as a priority and mention the priority you want to type, like in my case it's 2. So just try to execute this test case, it will become much more clear. So I'm simply pressing Ctrl F11 to execute this program and see how it works. So this is the execution order. So our test case have been successfully passed. You can see that default tests run were 3, means 3 test cases have been run and all of them has been passed. Like register account has been passed, login has been passed, and send email has been passed. Now let's look into the order of execution. Now we see that first of all it is printing first register your account, means this function is getting called. But you try to notice here that we have not passed any priority here, means we have simply called @test. Now there is a point to be noted that when you do not have the parameter or when you do not type the parameter priority, then by default TestNG will understand that the priority is 0, means this will be called first. So whenever you are writing simply @test, that will be called first by keeping the priority as 0. Afterwards we have used @test priority is equal to 1, means after the priority is 0, priority 1 will be called. So you can see that it is printing login to the account after registration, means this function has been called. You can look into this order of execution that first the register account has been called, then login, then send email, then afterwards send email has been called. Now the priority 2 has been reached, means first of all priority 0 will be called, priority 1 will be called, priority 2 will be called. So in this way we can prioritize our test cases using the annotations @test and by setting the parameter priority. So that was about the priority. So talking about skip test case in TestNG. Now sometimes we have written 10 test cases or many of the test cases and we want that particular test cases to be run, but we want that several test cases need to be skipped. That is, we do not want that test cases to be called. Okay, so in that case TestNG is providing us with the parameter enabled. So if we look into this program, there is a test function that we have written public void test case enabling. So we are printing I am not ready, please do not execute me, means there is something function you have not prepared or you feel like that this is not into the execution mode, let's script this test case. So there are certain time needs happen that you do not want that test case to be run, then we can skip this test case using annotation @test and setting the parameter as enabled is equal to false. So enabled simply means that if you want to enable or disable, so if you keep it false then it will not execute, but if you change it to true it will start executing. And by default if you do not pass this parameter @test, if you simply type, it will be by default true, means this will be enabled as true, means you have to execute this test case. So if you want this test case to be avoided or skipped, then you have to pass this parameter enabled is equal to false and set the value as false, so that test case will not execute. Now let's try to execute this program and see the output. It will become much more clear. So I'm simply pressing Ctrl F11 to execute this. Now the test case has been called. Now you can see that only the one test case has been called, that is test case, that is this one. Now this has not been called by the TestNG. Even you can say the TestNG has not even touched this test case, because it has noticed that the parameter you have passed is enabled is equal to false. So when you pass this parameter, it will not be called, and you can see that only this has been executed. So in this manner you can manage your test cases, and you can skip the test cases which you want not to be executed. So there is nothing that the test case has been called and nothing is getting printed from this function. TestNG simply move to this annotation at the test. So that was about skipping the test case in TestNG. Now timeout test in TestNG. When a test method is taking longer time than the specified time in milliseconds to execute, then that the test method will be terminated and marked as a failed. While running test methods, there can be cases where certain test methods got stuck or may take longer time than to complete the execution than expected. We need to handle these type of cases by specifying timeout and proceed to execute further test cases methods. It's simply like that you cannot wait up for a particular test case for an infinite time, because that will be like you're waiting for a particular test case and that test case is getting not properly executed. So it's better you skip, or you can say you simply move to the other test cases, so that your test cases execution do not comes to the halt and you do not get stuck. So how to handle timeouts in TestNG? So this is a sample program that will help you in understanding that how the timeouts work in TestNG. So let's look into this example. So if we look into this program, we have written two test cases. That is, one is sample test case, which is printing I am ready to execute. The second is execute timeout. So just to explain you that how really timeouts works, I have simply written the function in such a manner that it should get fail, so that I can give you an example that how the timeout really works. Okay, so there are two test functions, that is sample test case, another is execute timeout. So let's try to see the output first, then I will explain you that what we are trying to do in this program. Now you can see that the report is getting generated by the TestNG, that is I am ready to execute, that is first function is getting successfully passed, the second one is getting failed. Why? There is a reason given that it didn't finish within the time out 1000. Means if you look into this parameter, I have simply typed that the timeout should be 1000 and we are specifying the time in milliseconds. Means the test case should be wait for 1000 milliseconds. If the test case doesn't get finished in 1000 milliseconds, skip that test case and mark that test case as failed. Okay, so if you look into this report, the default test, it says test cases total run are 2 and there is one failure. So this has got failed. Why this has got failed? Because I have done a tweak, we can say I have intentionally marked as thread.sleep 3000 milliseconds. Means I am asking my Java program or Selenium test to execute after 3000 milliseconds. So it's waiting for 3000 milliseconds. Obviously 3000 milliseconds is greater than 1000 milliseconds, so it will simply mark that test case as failed because it is going to wait only for 1000 milliseconds. But here we have marked as thread.sleep 3000, so our program is waiting for 3000 milliseconds. That is the reason it has been marked as failed. Let's try to look at otherwise. If I mark that the thread.sleep as 500, so this time this program is going to wait for 500 milliseconds. So obviously this test case should get that should test case get executed as passed. So let's see the output. Now you can see that it is saying that I'm ready to execute. There are two test cases that has been passed: execute timeout and the sample test case. Okay. Now this time the test case has been executed successfully because there is no timeout that it has found. So the test case was demanding that it will only skip when the timeout is greater than 1000 milliseconds. Okay, so this is how the timeouts work in TestNG. Now talking upon depend on methods. Sometimes you may need to invoke the methods in a test case in a particular order, or you may want to share some data and state between the methods. Okay, so means sometimes there are certain test cases that are dependent on different functions. So this program will help us in understanding that how this dependent on methods work in TestNG. So first of all we will see the output of this program, then we will come to the explanation part. So to execute this program I'm simply going to the run, I'm clicking on it. Now you can see that our test case is getting failed. Why it is getting failed, we will look into this. So I have intentionally failed this test case to explain you that what is the logic behind depend on methods. So if we look into this program, the first test case says that @test enabled is equal to false. Means, as we know that enabled is equal to false means that do not call this test case. So the function is register account, and so it is printing that first register your account. The second function is send email. Now it is saying that depend on methods register account. Means send email is dependent upon register account. Means if this test case register account gets failed, or if it is getting skipped, obviously this will also get failed because it is depending on the method register account. Now if you look into this parameter, you have to pass the exact function name that you have written in your test case, that is register account. So this function name should be the exact in the parameter that you are trying to pass. So to talk about the depend upon methods, you simply have to write depend upon method is equal to, in curly braces you have to type the name of that function. And if we look into this program, that there are total 3 functions: register account, send email, login. So we know the execution order generally, what should be the expected, that first of all this should be called, then login should be called, then send email should be called. So we have marked this enabled is equal to false, so this will get skipped, this will be impacted, and this will also be impacted, because afterwards it will come to this part. Now it will get that register account cannot be passed because that is getting skipped, so it will even not execute. So if we look into this, it says that my class send email is dependent on method public void mask instance which is not annotated with the @test or not included. Means it has not been included and it has been marked as false. So these are the annotations that can help you in maintaining the test cases. So if we simply try to mark that enabled is equal to true, now we will see the execution. Now you can see that every test case has been passed. So first it has go to first register account, then it has go to the login to the account after registration. That is, it has gone to the login because by default, as I told you, the priority will be 0 for this. It will be called first, then priority 1 will be called, then it is going to call for depend on methods, means register on account. So in this manner, if the dependent method is getting successfully passed or it is marked as enabled, then it will be called first. Now this is the execution order for register account has been called, then login, then send email. So these were the explanations about the TestNG annotations, and these annotations are really widely used when you are trying to automate your test cases. So these annotations will really help you in maintaining your test cases when you have large number of test cases to be handled in TestNG. So I hope guys you like this video. So for more videos related to software testing, keep watching Software Testing Help. Thank you.